Is it
Okay.
pronounced Servetus or Servetus?
Well, the Trinity violates the transitivity of identity. So if you start by looking at the Athanasian Creed, you can extract like 7 basic elements of the Trinity doctrine, that the Father is God, the Son is God, the Spirit's God, the Father's not the Son, the Father's not the Spirit, the Son's not the Spirit, and there's only one God. So if you apply the transitive property of the transitivity of identity specifically to that, you could see that if the Son is God and God is the Father, then the Son necessarily is the Father. But one of our elements of the Trinity from the Athanasian Creed is that the Son's not the Father. So that's a self-contradiction.
I don't think they can understand the transitive property. Would you like to explain that to them?
What if God is not an agent and he's a mechanism? Still apply?
What if God's not what?
Not an agent, but a mechanism. That way we're no longer talking about agency. It would not be in the same sense, so it wouldn't violate the law of identity.
I'm not really following what you're saying, but in the Christian tradition, God's definitely an agent.
Johnny, can you do me a favor? Can you mute me and Josh so that Darth will debate Servetus?
Jack, quit over talking. You're muted. Where's Josh?
You guys know Darth better than that. He's not gonna. He wouldn't do it now just because you said that.
But now he's gonna do it because you said that he wouldn't do it.
No, it doesn't work that way.
But now he's not gonna do it because he said that said that you were gonna.
I know we're going too deep.
How many layers do we handle here?
Left. Oh no, he's still in here. Darth, you just gonna debate this? Just go ahead and talk to him.
This fish. It's already
Darth, this guy says that that the Trinity is impossible because of the transitive properties of the law of identity. What kind of bullshit is that?
Laws of logic and law of identity. That'd be a pretty.
Oh.
More. Huh? More. What? More.
$5.
I don't think it's a semantically identical claim to say that the Father is God or Jesus is God. It's not necessary. It's just not semantically identical.
Well, grammatically, it's an identity claim, right? You have a proper noun.
That's fine. That's fine. But there's a meaningful distinction there.
Sure, but even if you say it's a predication, you're going to be incoherent anyways because you're going to end up with 3 gods.
No, God could be. God, that's why I say God can be a mechanism or an attribute.
Okay, so again, grammatically, that's not what the word.
An apple is a tree, an orange, an apple tree is a tree, an orange tree is a tree, a pear tree is a tree, but they're one and the same, but they're not each other.
Okay, if you want to rephrase the claim from the Athanasian Creed as predications, it would be the Father is a God, the Son is a God, the Spirit's a God. But one of our elements of the Trinity is that there's only one God.
I don't think that you necessarily have to say a God. I think that that's pedantry.
Well, why wouldn't you want to use proper grammar though, right? Like as it stands, they're identity claims.
Well, now you're changing the claim.
And if you want to make them,
but now you're changing
otherwise,
the claim.
You've got to phrase it properly, right?
So is your claim that the Trinity is semantically impossible, or that there's a grammar issue because you're changing goalposts here?
Well, I'm saying if the standard of the Trinity is the Athanasian Creed, and it generally is, and we have what's taken to be an accurate translation of it, then what we're dealing with at face value is identity claims. If we're not dealing with identity claims,
but it's just necessarily not the case, because if it is necessarily a contradiction, then that's not the proper interpretation, right?
No, what do you mean?
I'm saying if the interpretation entails a contradiction, that's not the proper interpretation necessarily.
Okay, so I'm willing to work with alternative interpretations, but I would say as a first step, what you should do with that is phrase it grammatically properly.
Again, if you really care about pedantry that much, I don't think that that's the right way to find truth. But
I don't see what it has to do with pedantry. If you're going to rely on using improper grammar, probably it's because you want to obfuscate.
Well, maybe because it was written, several thousand years ago. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to have the same grammatical structure today.
So again, I'm working with the standard translation, but if you want to suggest an alternative one, go ahead.
I'm not convinced that I'm convinced that there might be a distinction between the use of is in this statement, that it might be predicated, but
okay,
that it's
so
not necessarily the case.
Suggest,
if I say a pear tree is a tree, that doesn't mean it's just a platonic tree, that it's some separate thing that it could be attributed.
A pear tree is a tree means you have an instance of a pear tree and an instance of a tree, and they're the same thing, right?
It means that it means that pear trees have the attributes of trees.
Great, and therefore it is a tree, right? So if the Son has the attributes of a god, therefore he's a god.
It's actually wrong to say if it's the is of predication that there are three gods.
Well, in conjunction with the fact that each of the gods is different, no, it's not.
What's the argument for that?
Well, the idea is that if each entity is a property of a god, then you're just predicating a god with properties, and you're saying that that god has three properties: the property of being Jesus, the property of being the Holy Spirit, and the property of being something else. So that's still one god, right?
Okay, if the Son is God, if that's a predication, again, you would phrase it properly as the Son is a God. So how many gods is the Son? He's one God. And if likewise the Father is a God, how many gods is he?
No, look, you're just not understanding. Like, look, if you say a ball, like if you say the ball is red, the ball is round, the ball is
okay, those are adjectives, right?
Right. I'm saying if it's the is of predication, look, it doesn't make any sense to predicate something as, unless you're saying something like Jesus is a God, right? Then the only way to make sense of that statement is to predicate God with Jesus. I think, yeah.
I'm not seeing a point here. You guys, if you want to avoid identity claims, yeah, you're making predication. So the predicate form would be the Son is a God.
It doesn't make sense to predicate if it's a predication, right? Let's say God is a predication of Jesus. If that's what it is, if God is a predication of Jesus, then there's three gods. But if Jesus is a predication of God, then there could be a single God, right? That's the way it's. So it depends on.
I don't know what you're trying to say when you say that.
Jack, are you sure this guy can beat Darth in a debate? He seems like a white
What do you
belt.
mean you don't know what I'm trying to say? It's clear what I'm trying to say.
You say the Son is a predication of God. What does that mean? The sentence we're dealing with.
I'm just saying that your claim is technically wrong, right? If there is some sort of coherent analysis of what it means for the Son to be a predication of God, then just the fact that it is a predication doesn't lead one to polytheism. So that's false, right? It doesn't matter whether or not I know what that coherent interpretation is. There's obviously a coherent interpretation, right? There's obviously a coherent interpretation.
What makes it obvious that there's a coherent interpretation?
Because I could just take those symbols to mean anything.
Sure, if you have no interest in sticking with the established meanings of words, yeah, okay, congratulations.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying it's obvious that someone could mean something like, oh, Jesus is the part of God which comes in the flesh and is temporal.
Okay, that's not an obvious meaning. You're posing a formal contradiction. The Son is God. The Son is God cannot be construed as the Son is a part of a God. How do you grammatically derive that?
Look, you're just being stubborn with your interpretation.
No, I didn't write this shit. I'm dealing with what the Athanasian
I'm
Creed
just
says.
saying that.
And if
I'm
they
just
wanted to
saying
say
that.
that
Look,
the Son
I'm
is
just
a part
saying
of
that
a
there's an
God,
analysis.
they could have
I'm saying
said
that
the
there's an
Son's a part of a
analysis on
God.
the table, right? I'm saying that there's an analysis on the table. You're not actually dealing with the analysis. All you're doing is bitching about the fucking language.
Yeah, and I'm saying that your analysis has to be grounded in
It
the
doesn't.
text, and it's not grounded in the text if you're making up things like the Son is God can be properly
It's
translated as the Son
it's
is
just
a
supposed to
fraction of
be.
God.
It's just supposed to be exegetical. You don't have. Look. The whole point is that I'm providing an analysis of what that could mean, right? And if one is more beholden to the law of identity, then your specific exegetical framework, then it's not going to make sense to exegete it that way. So you're going to have to exegete it a different way. This way is coherent. You're not providing a fucking argument for that.
No, you haven't established that whatever the hell you think the coherent interpretation is can actually be derived from the wording of the text. The text does not say anything about people being fractions or components or ingredients of a God. The Son is God, is what the text says. I'm already being generous if I allow you to convert that from an identity claim into a predication. As a predication, it's not the Son is a part of a God. It's the Son is a God.
The Athanasian Creed is not actually scripture, right?
No.
So Darth Dawkins is probably not going to accept an argument against the Trinity that is an attack on the Athanasian Creed.
Well, there's no Trinity in the Bible, so it's impossible to do anything.
But he wouldn't accept that. He wouldn't agree that there's no Trinity in the Bible.
Okay, I mean, that's a different debate, but he'd be wrong on that point too then.
Maybe somebody can get Darth to respond to Servetus.
How did you say it? Servetus?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my other nickname.
Oh, you're
Servetus.
Servetus from Pal Talk. This guy's been running this argument successfully for years, and now Josh just defeated him on Pal Talk. He's been running it on people on Pal Talk for years.
It's a terrible argument.
It's a terrible argument because your rebuttal is that you can add however many words you want to come up with a totally different meaning than the grammar.
The meaning is
Servetus,
not.
I have a question. I have a question for you, Servetus.
Yeah.
When the word God is used in Scripture, is it used in a univocal way, an equivocal way, or an analogical way?
I'll mute myself.
There are multiple definitions found in a lexicon for the word God. None of them are Trinity, by the way.
I didn't ask you that question. You want to answer the question? Do you need me to repeat it?
Maybe. Do you want to make a point?
Yeah. Do you know what the difference between univocal, equivocal, and analogical is?
Sure. Do you know how to make a point?
Can you tell me what the differences between the three are?
Well, I didn't come to do an interview. I made a claim about how the Trinity is incoherent. I'm not sure.
I know. Since you're such an expert here in debunking the Trinity, and since there are numerous Christian theologians who also have PhDs in philosophy, such as Van Til, Bahnsen, and others, okay, and that you have discovered a gem of a truth that refutes the Trinity, it's amazing to me that these people who have earned PhDs in philosophy overlook this. So I'm just asking you a question. I'm asking you a question.
You should
okay.
read analytical
Since you told me, since you told me,
of the Society of Christian Philosophy.
Hang on a sec. Don't overtalk us.
Yeah. Since you told me you're familiar with univocal, equivocal, and analogical as it relates to biblical theology, could you tell me what they mean with respect to each other?
No, I'm not going to do that. Here's what I'm going to do, though. I'm going to tell you that you are not familiar with the actual philosophical literature because you think that what I'm saying.
We're not discussing the philosophical literature.
Trinitarian philosophers would be the first to tell you that the Trinity is incoherent at face value.
Yeah, you're not responding.
Of the transitivity of identity.
You're just filibustering right now. You're not responding to what I'm saying. Now, let me
I
ask
don't
you
have
this.
an obligation to respond to what you're saying. You're not making an
let me
argument.
ask you. Yeah, I didn't make an argument. I asked a question.
Well, good for you. Ask questions, but you're not making an argument.
Which explains
and you're
that
not
you
dealing
don't.
with my argument.
Yeah, which tells me you don't even have a basic familiarity of some of the basic concepts that deal with the Godhead in terms of biblical theology. See, if you had actually had more experience in theology, you wouldn't have made such an elementary
okay, I'm looking
blunder.
for a rebuttal.
Yeah, no, I'm simply saying you don't know what you're talking
You
about.
simply don't have a rebuttal, right?
Yeah. Okay.
You
So when
simply don't have a rebuttal?
when we speak of God, let me ask you this question: is God comprehensible in His entirety?
Does anyone have a rebuttal?
Yeah. In the Christian worldview.
Okay. So again, you're trying to interview me.
What is I'm asking you a question. Okay. So you don't want to have a conversation. That's okay. I understand.
No, I want to have an argument.
I'm asking you a question. See, what you're doing now is you're filibustering and you're being evasive. Now, I asked you a question. When it comes to God in biblical theology, for those people who actually studied the Bible and theology, you're over talking me. Okay, I'm responding
That's
to
right,
you.
because you're filibustering. I made an argument. You're not.
So
you're not.
You don't want to have a conversation. Then that's fine. I understand that you don't understand the relationship between univocal, equivocal, and analogical when it comes to referencing God.
Okay, so do you have a rebuttal?
Yeah. Do you know what the relationship?
Okay, that's not a rebuttal. Do you know what a rebuttal is?
Do you know what the relationship? Do you know what the relationship? Okay, you're going to keep on over talking me. See, what you're doing right now is called plan. You're over talking me again. What you're doing is what's called Plan B obstructionism. Okay, I'm asking you some very simple questions, and the reason why I'm asking you these questions is because I know ahead of time you didn't know the answer to it. When I ask people questions, I almost always know the answer to the question I'm asking. The reason why I asked you the question was to demonstrate to everyone else that you didn't even have a basic understanding of theology with respect to the concept of the Trinity.
Okay, see, this is your concept of obstruction, is that you talk forever without making a rebuttal, and then you just keep talking, and you still don't have one. So that's where can we go from here? Do you have a rebuttal?
No, I'm not looking to argue with you. I'm trying to find out what you understand about the nature of how God is spoken of, what you understand theologically. So when God is spoken,
great, but do you have a rebuttal?
God, you're over talk. I'm asking you a question.
You're right. I'm over talking you. Do you have a rebuttal?
Right. So I'll just wait till you're done.
So if I just stay on the mic and then you eventually want to take it, you're over talking me, right? But that's whatever. Okay. There aren't apparently like turn intervals here specifically, so you're just hogging the mic. I want a rebuttal. Do you have one?
Now, when Scripture speaks of God, okay, does it speak of God univocally, equivocally, or analogically?
Do you have a rebuttal? That's a really basic question.
I'm asking you a question.
Yeah, but it's not an interview. It's not an interview. I made an argument, and you're not making a rebuttal.
Yeah, I'm trying to show you how inept your argument is.
Try to show me a rebuttal. Try to show me a rebuttal. That'd be really cool.
Are you aware that the terms univocal, equivocal, and analogical have to do with semantics and grammar?
Are you going to make a rebuttal?
Okay. Are you doing your critique based upon grammar and syntax?
Are you going to make a rebuttal? This is
I'm asking you a question.
I made the argument. I didn't need to interview anybody to make an argument, right?
So,
I made an argument, and then we had an attempt at a rebuttal, but the attempt was to completely misconstrue the basic text. The text does not say anything about people being parts of a God. In fact, other texts emphatically reject that. The Son is fully God, not part of a God. The Son is fully God. The Father is fully God. The Spirit is fully God. So, sorry, that's not an option. But you're just trying to interview me, and you don't have a rebuttal.
Okay, so when God is referred to, he's spoken of and he's described, are those terms univocal, equivocal, or analogical?
Do you have a rebuttal? This is incredible. I mean, you don't, so I'm not sure. I guess I'm asking rhetorical questions at this point.
Yeah.
But I would be interested if someone else had a rebuttal. That'd be great.
I want to see if you can answer the question.
I don't care. Too bad. How about offer a rebuttal, and I'll answer that.
Do you understand what the term univocal means with respect to equivocal and analogical?
Do you understand that you can attempt a rebuttal without interviewing people? I'm not going to be interviewed, but if you offer a rebuttal, I will deal with it.
See, you're demonstrating that you don't even have a basic theological understanding of how theological terms are used within Scripture and in theological commentaries with respect to God's essential and accidental properties.
Okay, so at some point, will you realize it's possible to make rebuttals without ever actually
I'm attempting to
interviewing
show
people?
you don't
It's
know.
like when I came in the room, what I did is I made an argument, and I didn't say, hey, can I ask questions to, I don't know, level 36
argument,
wizard,
does that,
or maybe
does
Woody,
that,
when Woody
does that argument,
like to be interviewed.
that analysis that you're giving, is it based upon that Scripture is speaking of God univocally?
You have a rebuttal.
Well, you made an analysis. Is that analysis of critiquing the univocal use of terms?
Well, okay, if you understood the argument, you would have the answer to that, wouldn't you?
I'm waiting for an answer.
If the Father is God and God is the Son, then the Father is the Son. It follows necessarily from the transitivity of identity.
Okay.
If
That's
you
not
think
an
that
answer.
there are
That's
different references,
that's not
for
you
God
repeating
here,
your
you
line
could
of
try
reasoning
to,
again.
I don't know, you could try to establish that, but you're not doing
Listen.
anything to forward that.
You're not responding to my question.
I don't have to respond to your question. How are you not understanding this? I
you
provided
don't.
an argument. Providing a rebuttal does not involve
Does that
interview.
argument?
I'm sorry.
Does that argument? Does that argument critique biblical language that is speaking of God
I
univocally?
already told you, I'm quoting the Athanasian Creed, not the Bible.
Okay, you did quote the Bible a number of times. Now,
in fact, I did not quote the Bible a number of times because
I'm
I quoted
asking
it
you.
0 times. You don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, I'm asking you. You see, this is why we never had continued conversations, because of your evasiveness. Now, when the Bible speaks of God, okay, right, in terms of his properties, attributes, his nature, which would include his essential and accidental properties. When the Bible speaks of God, is it speaking of God in a univocal way?
You've had like 20 minutes at this point to try to make a point, to try a rebuttal, and instead you've gotten confused and thought that I was quoting the Bible. It's really not in a good place right now. I would just recommend that you try to make a rebuttal, because I don't really want to waste another 20 minutes.
I'm trying to analyze to see if your
okay, we'll try to analyze the rebuttal in your head and then put it on the mic.
Now, in what manner does the Bible speak of God's nature and his properties? Does it do so in a univocal way?
Except that I said it would be a different debate whether the Trinity can be found in the Bible, and the answer is no, but that is not the debate that I started with.
Okay, I'll try one more time, and if
I would say try for the first time to make a rebuttal for the first time. That would be really great.
Being obnoxious just makes you look bad, because it's an attempt to hand wave so people won't pay attention to the fact that I'm asking you a very fair question based upon your critique.
Okay.
And you either don't, you're over talking me. You're over talking me. You're over talking me. You're over talking me. You're over talking me.
That's right. You keep hogging them. Okay, I'll stay on the mic.
You're over talking.
Okay, now you're over talking me. So
all right. Well, then there's no point in going further, because all you're simply doing is, you see, you're so afraid to answer the question.
Is over talking me, right?
All right, I'll wait till you're done.
I don't ever pass the mic if I never make a point, if I never have a rebuttal, but someone else comes on the mic, then they're over talking me. That's all you're saying.
Are you done being an obstructionist?
You guys
for a rebuttal. Are you done wasting?
Okay, now
act like adults.
No, I'm acting like a complete adult, Ludic. Okay, don't put me in the same camp as he is. I'm being completely diplomatic, being completely respectful, and he's just simply playing the obstructionist game. Now, I asked him a very simple question about his critique. He either does not know the answer, or he's actually afraid to answer the question because he thinks I've laid a trap. I will leave it to everyone else in the room to decide for themselves why he employed these obstructionist tactics and he refused to answer the question.
A bit of both.
Why won't he answer a clarifying question about his argument? I don't understand.
Because the question, if it answers, will reveal the underbelly of his argument, and I will able to slice right into it the moment he answers.
Ooh, the soft underbelly.
Well, then you should slice right
fuck.
into it. What are you waiting for? I feel like you should do that if you have the ability to slice.
I'm waiting.
Slice into the
When
thing.
the Bible speaks about God and his attributes.
Hey, you're being obstructionist. By the way, excuse me. I was on the mic and you're being obstructionist right now. This is Class B, Level 4, Subsection 3.
Yeah, imitating me doesn't make you look
I really
good.
don't appreciate it. So if you
I'm not
could
being
just
obstructionist.
slice into the underbelly instead of being
Right,
obstructionist,
yeah,
could you,
yeah.
excuse me, could you stop being obstructionist? I really don't like that.
I'm not being
So if you could
obstructionist.
just slice into the underbelly instead of obstructing things, that would be awesome though.
Yeah, so do you have an answer to my question?
Just attack all three definition stuff.
You see,
Yeah, slice
what
away.
I've just
Slice away at the
demonstrated,
definitions. Let's do that.
what I've just demonstrated to everybody here, he wants to come along on his high horse and he thinks he's doing a philosophical analysis. But when I ask him, when the Bible speaks of God's nature, either whether it's to the Godhead proper, to Jesus, to the Father, or to the Spirit, when I ask him when the Bible speaks of God in terms of his attributes, either collectively or individually, in which manner is the Bible referring to God, he refuses to answer, either out of ignorance or that he's afraid that whatever response he gives, that I have a trap laid.
Okay, I didn't say anything about the Bible, to reiterate for the 20th time. What I did say is that we have the Athanasian Creed, and we can extract from that 7 basic elements that make up the creed, and if we apply standard logic to those elements, we arrive inevitably at incoherence, okay? Now, you don't have any rebuttal to that basic fact. Other people at least tried and, suggested, well, what if we interpret the Son as God as the Son is a part of a God? See, that doesn't work grammatically, but at least it's an attempt, right? They tried to offer a rebuttal, but you haven't done that.
When theologians, both in the past and the present, including those who have written some of the church creeds, when they refer to God and his attributes, are they speaking of God's attributes in a univocal way?
By that he means one meaning, right?
Right.
Do you have an answer to that question, Servetus?
Do you have a rebuttal? I already said I'm not being interviewed. Either you have a rebuttal to what I said, or you don't. Now you seem to think you do because you just said, "Oh, I can slice into that." Excuse me, you're being obstructionist. Yeah, and you're being obstructionist. Could you stop doing that? So if
Stella,
you could
what do you
slice
mean?
into that underbelly, that would be
What do
really
you
great.
mean? What do you mean when you say interview? Why do you keep saying interview?
Well, that's like my catch-all term for when instead of people offering rebuttals, they want to ask me questions.
But do you think they're clarifying questions to help him understand?
I don't think so. He's completely confused. He thinks I was quoting the Bible, so he's not even listening in the first place.
Well, I changed the question to what theologians in the past, including
that's not the
certain
argument,
church creeds, and in the present, when they speak of God's nature, both either collectively or in part, in terms of his essential and accidental properties, are they speaking of God in a univocal way?
So again, you're not making a rebuttal. You can't really work with that. Sorry. The Athanasian Creed.
I've never seen somebody so squirmy, Darth, when you're talking to them.
Well, listen, I've done my job. I think I've thoroughly humiliated them.
You think that, but you haven't offered a rebuttal. So in fact, you think.
Well, I've showed you that by not answering the question, your critique doesn't have legs, because when we use terms,
Evening, everyone.
okay, we are either speaking univocally, equivocally, or analogically.
How y'all
Your
doing?
critique
Be quiet,
involves
Jeff, right
using
now, please.
terms,
Alright.
but you cannot identify what category of terms that you're critiquing, whether you're critiquing a univocal usage of God's attributes, an equivocal usage of God's attributes, or an analogical. So I don't know what your critique, how it applies, whether it's univocal, equivocal, or analogical.
Well, then you don't understand it.
Either
How
you, okay,
it
please.
applies. I mean, I can
I'm
repeat
speaking
myself.
right now.
You already
I'm
said that.
speaking right now.
Right, but again,
Okay.
if you just stay on the
I'll
mic,
just turn your microphone on over talking. Okay. All right. So I'll turn your
it's always going to be by your standard.
Okay, I have your
instruction
microphone
for me to
turned down.
attempt to
Okay.
respond.
Now,
So,
for everyone else in the
sorry
room,
that
he's
you're
just
playing
filibustering,
It's
and
not
he's just simply
obstructionism for me
blathering
to
on
try to
like he's not
actually respond
intimidated.
to
But the
your
fact of the matter is, his
repetition of the same
critique
question
entirely depends on whether the terms that he is evaluating and how they're being used are being used univocally, equivocally, or analogically. And as I said before, and I'll repeat it again, he either doesn't know or he's afraid to answer to any one of those three options because he thinks I have a trap laid for him.
They're irrelevant.
Maybe you could send him a YouTube video that explains what those terms mean, and then he can come back to it.
Well, you see, when you try to critique philosophy without even having a basic understanding of certain theological concepts, it demonstrates how inept he is.
Doesn't his critique just follow into that he was using those terms univocally, or critiquing the univocal
Servetus,
definition?
Well,
do you think a YouTube video would help here?
His critique is essentially meaningless because he cannot identify in what way the terms are being used.
Okay, so let's play your game. Do you think
No,
that
I'm done.
the
I'm
sentence,
done
the
responding
Father
to
is
you.
God,
I gave you
in
ample
contrast to the
opportunity
sentence, the
to
Son is
interact
God,
with
that
me, and
God
you were
is being
obnoxious
used
the whole time.
in a
So don't
non-univocal
waste your
way?
time
Is that
speaking
what-
to me.
is that
We're
your
done.
suggestion?
I did my
So
job.
the
You've been
Father
exposed.
is God. God means one thing here. The Son is God. Now we're dealing with a different definition. Because my argument was that if the Father is God and God is the Son, then the Father is the Son. So as someone just pointed out clearly, in order for that to follow, they must have the same referent, right? The God in question must be the same one. So if you think there's a different referent or a different definition between those sentences, I mean, you could suggest that. You haven't done that. You've merely posed the question 10 trillion times, but you haven't actually suggested that maybe the Father is God means something different from the Son is God.
Just to clear up for me, does Darth think God is beholden to the laws of logic?
You don't want to.
That would be an incoherent notion from the Christian worldview. Nothing, God is beholden to nothing other than his eternal nature.
Okay, so
everything that exists, not sure.
So,
all right, I'm just going to have to mute you. Okay, you're
actually, that's funny. That's funny
so
what Darth just said.
Okay,
not sure. Everything that is
when
God is
compared
not
to the
contingent
sentence,
upon anything that is
you
not
think that
God.
those have different meanings?
Well, that what's funny is that Darth said that he's beholden to nothing but his nature, but I'm pretty sure that he would agree that the laws of logic are of God's nature. So the answer to your question, Orson, is yes. God is beholden to the laws of logic, which are
I think
his
it's
nature.
no.
How do you get that? No, he is, because he would say that the laws of logic are God's nature.
Would he? You put
He
in those
said
words
that
in his
he's
mouth.
beholden. I've heard him say that before. That's the point, is I've heard him say that before. So
No, that his nature is the laws of logic.
yeah, the laws of logic are God's nature. So he is beholden to nothing but his nature. So he is beholden to his nature, which are the laws of logic. So yes, he is beholden to the laws of logic.
Darth, do you hear that?
Yeah, that's a misrepresentation of my position, and never trust anything that comes out of his mouth.
You should clarify then. Does he believe that the laws of logic are not part of God's nature?
Yeah, JJ, do you know any French?
So the law, so God isn't beholden to the law of identity then. So what's the point in this argument?
Wait, this is gonna be great. I want to hear this. JJ, do you know any French?
I said un poco.
Yeah, have you ever heard the French phrase "fuck off"? Okay, so not sure. You see, what happens is, you know, we have these
just a bunch of foolish questions.
Atheists who've never studied any biblical theology, with rare exceptions. Okay, and then they want to come in because they've read a little bit of philosophy, and they think that they can use philosophy to defeat the Christian God. I mean, did they not realize how many Christian theologians, many of which have PhDs in philosophy as well as theology?
So, Orson,
not
again,
sure. Let me ask you this question. Not sure. Let me ask you this
him.
question. Let me ask you this very simple question. Not sure, right? What do you think that somebody like William Lane Craig, who not only possesses a PhD in philosophy, but a PhD in theology as well, even though I disagree with him on certain points, he's a brilliant philosopher and theologian. Do you think that he would be stymied by the silly critique that Servetus thinks is, you know, a cutting refutation of the Trinity?
I'm not familiar.
Orson, you're going to have to ask him if he does not believe that the laws of logic are part of God's nature. Pretty sure I did not misrepresent him.
Is Servetus an
But
atheist?
that's the accusation.
Servetus, are you an atheist?
No.
Okay.
You Mormon?
What are you, Stella?
I'm kind of agnostic, kind of deist.
Oh, Jesus.
But agnostics don't know anything.
They don't? Okay.
So you didn't even know that.
Doesn't agnostic come from the Greek word gnosis that means to know?
Is that how meaning works? It's all etymology?
It depends if we're talking about univocally, analogically, or equivocally.
That was good.
Yeah, Orson, you really should press Darth on what he thinks the laws of logic are then, if they're not just part of God's nature. Because otherwise, he's just lying to your face. But that's nothing new.
I would assume he'd say they're part of God's creation.
No, he would say the laws of logic are part of God's nature, which allowed him to create the rest of the universe, to be in in alignment with his nature.
Well, he just said the opposite. So
no, he didn't.
Craig, wouldn't you agree that truth by its very nature is exclusive?
Yeah.
Wait a minute, Crowley, you forgot to add, sir.
Have to do with anything. Like, I thought the topic was if I can establish that the Trinity is incoherent. Like, are we done with that topic? No one could rebut it, or what?
I thought
you
I said that
you were like a slimy fucking hog. You wouldn't answer Darth's clarifying question.
Clarifying question.
I mean, I can confidently say, Krill, that he tried to bullshit his way out here, out of this, and it's evident to everyone in the room that he didn't even understand the nature of the question, let alone refuse it.
False.
Crow.
Okay, let me tell you guys what a fucking clown Servetus is. I knew him for years from Pal Talk. The argument against the Trinity, it's all he has. It's all he ever talks about. It was so fucking boring. Jesus Christ, I would have to leave the room.
I didn't
And like
suggest the
Pal
topic,
Talk is the
though.
lowest
Yeah.
fruit on the internet,
It's
right?
on
I mean,
Shut up, I'm
it
talking.
wasn't difficult for me to Servetus. Just took me 1 or 2 questions.
Look, the argument against the Trinity is all Servetus has, and he would always be up on the mic on Pal Talk talking about how God cannot be the Father, and he would be typing in text while he was doing it as if he was teaching a class.
I'm
He'd be
actually
like,
surprised that you haven't overdosed yet, Godless Girl. I really thought you
Oh, shit.
at this point. I was pretty sure that the meth had finally finished you off.
he would like be typing in text like that, and he'd always capitalize. I
Servetus,
remember him
don't
so good.
forget-
He'd always
Servetus, don't
capitalize the
forget when
not,
Jesse Jackson
and he
said,
never
"Keep
talked
hope
about
alive."
anything else. He never talked about anything else. And I find it very sad. I find it very sad that because Pale Talk is like the lowest fruit on the internet, and then he comes to another venue to try to debate his only argument that he's ever had for years, and he can't defend anything else. And he gets crushed by 2 people in a row. I find it very sad. I find it very sad.
I'm sorry, did the meth like addle your brain to where you couldn't follow who started the topic? Because I didn't start the topic.
Let's put this in perspective. Godless Girl's talking out of her ass. Godless Girl, did Darth have a rebuttal to Servetus's argument?
No, I'm just trolling Servetus.
Yeah. Servetus crushed him, right? Now,
I had a response.
Well, wait a minute. Before we do that, though. Oh, can I use it?
Yeah, but let's just get something. Let's just get something clear. He didn't fucking respond to me. Okay.
No, that's another issue.
Servetus, it was interesting that he said that there were all these theologians, right, who would not be in any way troubled by your argument, right? What's interesting is he wasn't able to cite an argument from any of those theologians, right? Now he happened to cite William Lane Craig, right? Now you're actually familiar with Craig's view on the Trinity, right?
That's right. Yeah, and also as I explained,
Servetus?
He's hilariously ignorant of the entire field of study around the Trinity. If he thinks that I concocted the idea that the transitivity of identity is at least prima facie defeater of the Trinity, I was interrupted before, but I was starting to say that, for example, I think there is a verbatim quote from Swinburne that the Trinity is at face value incoherent. And that's in a forget which encyclopedia article on the Trinity. But anyways, this stuff is super well known to actual analytic philosophers.
Yeah, well, can you tell us how Craig deals with the objection that you've raised?
Okay, so Craig's position is called Trinity monotheism. And it's been a while since I've read Craig. I think it's maybe in Philosophical Foundations for a Christian Worldview or something, where he sketches this out, and then he subsequently has interacted with like William Hasker, and I think what's the guy's name? I can't think of his name. Anyways, so the basic idea is just to claim that the one true God is the Trinity. That's the one God, and that when you say that the persons are God, what you're saying is similar to the statement that like a bone found in a field is feline, not because it is a cat, but because it pertains to a cat. So you try to construe, again, violating the grammar, the claim that, for example, the Son is God as meaning like the Son is basically a proper part of a God. So that was kind of what the other person was also suggesting. But grammatically, it's just you can't twist the actual text of the Christian creeds to turn the Son is God, and in fact fully God, into the Son is a part of a God. And as I also said, like the word there is not an adjective anyways. It's a noun. The Son is God is not, the Son is godly. It's not an adjective. So it's just not a viable rendering.
Well, doesn't he use an analogy to Cerberus?
Yeah, he also used that and like famously pissed off a bunch of dipshits like
Jack, why should I have to tolerate this shit when I can crush this asshole?
Well, go ahead, but I didn't like that EF was getting away with crowing that he had beaten Servetus, right, when he just dodged Servetus's challenge to provide a counter argument.
Yeah, everyone watched EF fail. No one's deluded about that. Is there anybody here that's fucking deluded about that? That's not fucking trolling? Like Krill?
Did you hear how nervous? Did you hear how Krill was just trolling? Did you
That's
hear
what I
how
said.
nervous? Did you hear how nervous Darth was? That like his voice was actually quaking as he was talking to Servetus. You have to give him credit for like going that long as he did, you know, knowing how badly it was going for him.
Yeah,
I wonder
it's
if
awesome.
EF knows how foolish he looks.
Do you have a rebuttal?
Me. EF seems to think that he wasn't required to provide a rebuttal to Servetus's argument, that if he just could ask questions, right, that's all he needed to do was ask questions, right, rather than show where Servetus had made an error in his reasoning. I mean, it was just pathetic.
Pretty pathetic. I'm not familiar with this creed he cited, though.
The Athanasian Creed is a formulation from early Christianity of what the nature of the Trinity is.
When was this formed, though? Oh, you did? Athanasian. All right, thanks. Well, so this creed, though, is derived from what's said in the Bible about God.
If one took the aspects of God and the way the aspects of God
and why they did that, and
that interact with humanity as different sort of units, one can say that those units are God in the sense that there's not a single part of them